See you in the future lectures. Bye! Welcome everybody to the first lecture of our introductory section of our Python hacking course. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you where you can find and how you can download and install the VirtualBox software that we're going to need in order to create our virtual machines. Okay, now it is rather easy to install this software, and as its name says, we're going to need it in order to host the Kali Linux machine in which we're going to write our Python code. So let's get straight into how to download it. So all you need to do is go to your Google Chrome or Firefox, whichever search engine you're using, and navigate to the link virtualbox.org. Once you visit this link, it will lead you to this page where it will tell you to download VirtualBox 6.1. Now it doesn't really matter which version you are going to download, they're rather all the same, so you can simply just click on the newest one, which in my case at the moment is 6.1, click on download, and it will lead you to this page where it will ask you for which type of host you want to download the VirtualBox. And right here under the VirtualBox platform packages, you can choose Windows hosts, OS X hosts, Linux distributions, and Solaris hosts. Since I'm running Windows 10 environment on my main PC, I'm going to navigate to the Windows hosts, and just like that, it should start downloading the VirtualBox installer file onto my machine. As we can see right here, it is not that large of a file, it is 108 megabytes large, so as soon as it downloads, you can simply just run it and install VirtualBox. The process of installation of VirtualBox is rather easy, but I'm still going to guide you through the steps as to how to install VirtualBox. So as we can see right here, there's not much time left. Okay, so here it is. Let's open this up. Show in folder. I will paste it onto my desktop right here. And all you need to do is run the file. We get a pop-up window which says preparing to install. And here is the welcome window to the VirtualBox. We want to click next right here. Next here as well. And under the custom setup, you can choose which options you want to leave unchecked and which options you want to uncheck. So for example, I will leave all 4 checked as I do want start menu entries and I also want shortcut on my desktop. So I'm just going to click on next right here. And this is a warning that usually comes up once you install VirtualBox, which tells you that during the installation of VirtualBox you might actually temporarily disconnect from the internet. Even though that never really happened to me, it might be the best idea in case you're downloading something to actually wait for that to finish before you actually click on the yes to proceed the installation. Since I am not doing anything at the moment, I am simply just going to click here yes and click here on install. And as it says right here, this may take several minutes, usually it is around 2 to 3 minutes. It will ask us for the administrator password. We're going to click here yes, since I don't really have a password to type in, and it should start installing VirtualBox on my machine. Now, you might notice that I already do have VirtualBox, but this is 6.0 version, and this version is actually going to be updated to the newest one, which is 6.1. So I'm just going to wait for this to finish and I will get back to you right away. Okay, so the installation has finished and I'm just going to click right here, finish, and it should automatically start my VirtualBox. And here it is. Now, your window might be a little bit different because I already have some machines installed right here and you should not see any of these Kali Linux machines or Ubuntu machines, OS machines on your screen. This should all be empty. You should see these buttons right here, which new stands for basically creating a new virtual machine, which we're going to take a look at how to do in the next video. For now on, we successfully installed Oracle VM VirtualBox, and in the next video we're going to see how we can install Kali Linux as our operating system on the virtual machine. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye! Welcome back everyone. Since in the previous video we successfully installed VirtualBox, right now we want to see where we can download Kali Linux, which version should we download, and how we can create a virtual machine. Okay, so right now, if you go to your Google Chrome and navigate to the official Kali Linux website, which is the link kali.org/downloads, you should see this page, which will give you the latest version of Kali Linux. In this case, at the current time, this is 2020.1a, and it is the size of 2 gigabytes. Now, as I mentioned, this is the newest version possible, but I will not be using this version in the course. The reason for that is it seems to be a little bit laggy on my PC, but if you want to use the newest version and it works perfectly for you, feel free to download it. It doesn't really matter regarding the course content. So in order to download it, you simply just click on Kali Linux 64-bit and it should start downloading it over HTTP. And you also have the option to download it over torrent if you'd like. Now, for those of you that also do not like the newest version, you can simply just go to another page, which is old.kali.org, which will have all of the previous Kali Linux versions and their release dates, so you can download any version you like. In my case, I will just use the version before the newest one, which is 2019.4. You simply just click on the Kali 2019.4. And it should lead you to this page where you can download the ISO file for the Kali Linux 2019.4 version for 64-bit and 32-bit machine. Okay? So I would simply just download Kali Linux 2019.4 and use this ISO file in order to continue the installation. If you want to use the newest version, well, then you download this Kali Linux 64-bit or Kali Linux 32-bit depending on your machine, but you are most likely going to have a 64-bit machine. So once you click on it, as we can see in just a few seconds, it should start downloading it, but I'm not going to wait for this because I already have the ISO file downloaded, so I will just cancel this installation. I will navigate to my VirtualBox and let's see how we can use the ISO file in combination with VirtualBox to create a Kali Linux virtual machine. Also, you might have noticed that I already have a couple Kali Linux machines installed right here. I'm going to use this one for the actual course, but I will show you how you can proceed with the installation of the newest version since it just came out and it has some different options during the installation that you might get confused with. So let's cover that as well. You simply just click on the new button, which will create a new virtual machine. It should pop up with this window where it will ask you for the name and operating system. You can name it anything you want. I will name it New Kali. Set the type of the operating system to be Linux and the version to be Debian 64-bit in case you downloaded the 64-bit version of Kali Linux. Now the reason we use Debian is because Kali Linux is Debian based, therefore we choose this option. Click here on Next and here it will ask you for the memory size or the RAM memory that you want to allocate to your virtual machine. I would advise you not to go below the 1 gigabyte of RAM, but you can also go up to the 4, 5, maybe even 8 gigabytes of RAM, depending on your actual machine. Okay, so I will just leave it on 1 gigabyte. We want to leave the option create a virtual hard disk now. Click on create. Also leave it on VirtualBox disk image, click on next. And we want to set dynamically allocated. Here you allocate the amount of memory you want to give from your hard disk to the virtual machine. And you should not go below 20 gigabytes, especially in the newest version, which allows you to download and install a bunch of different softwares used for ethical hacking. So I'm just going to leave it on 20 gigabytes and click on create. And we can see the new Kali has been added. Now, before we proceed with the installation of the Kali Linux, in the next video, we need to change a few of the settings inside of this machine. So select your machine that you just created, click on settings, and under the storage settings, you want to navigate to the controller IDE, delete this empty part by right-clicking on it and clicking remove attachment. Click on remove, and then you want to click on this circle with a plus. Add the version of Kali Linux that you downloaded. In this case, I have the 2019.4 and 2020.1a, and I'm just going to show you for the purpose of this tutorial the 2020.1a. Click on choose. Now another thing that you might want to consider in case you cannot see them right here, you can go onto the add and simply just find the ISO file that you downloaded inside of your PC wherever you saved it. Okay? So let's click on cancel. And also another thing that you want to change is under the network settings, you want to go to the attached to and click on bridged adapter. Also make sure that you leave it on the Ethernet cable connection since wireless adapters know to actually present problem inside of Kali Linux, and most of them aren't even supported. Therefore, you might actually have problem connected to the internet if you connect over wireless adapter. That's why it is always the best idea to use Ethernet cable. Okay, so once you finish all of that, click on OK, and your new Kali Linux machine is ready for the installation. So we're going to continue with that in the next video. We're going to pass through all of the steps, and then we are ready to jump into the coding sections of this course. Now keep in mind that even after the installation, there are a few things that you should do with Kali Linux. I will make sure to leave all of the links below so we don't waste time explaining the Kali Linux and explaining the command line, and instead we can just focus on the coding parts of the course. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye! Welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to continue with the installation of Kali Linux. So we successfully managed to set up all of the options inside of our VirtualBox, and right now we are ready to start our machine and install the operating system. I'm going to lead you through all of the steps needed to take in order to install Kali Linux, and then in the next video we are ready to start hacking using Python. Okay, so all you need to do right now is click on the start button while you selected your Kali Linux machine. As we can see, this is the first window that we will encounter. Let me just enlarge my screen. It will ask us for different types of options, such as if we want the graphical install or the usual install. It doesn't really matter. We can simply just go with the graphical install and install the Kali Linux like that. Okay, so here is the next option that pops up. It will ask us to select the language. I will leave it on English. The location, it doesn't really matter, I could just leave it on United States. If you like to, you can select your own location. Click on continue. And here it asks us which type of keyboard configuration we want to use. I will leave it on American English. Click on continue. Now while this is installing, another thing I want to mention is another reason why I don't really like the newest version. Because it will ask you to actually have a new user and not use the root account in order to complete your actions inside of the Kali Linux. And that is also another thing why I prefer the older versions, because you can simply just use root account to perform anything you'd like. Now keep in mind that using root account can cause some security breaches, but since we're using a virtual machine, this is just for the learning purposes, it doesn't really matter. That's why I chose the 2019.4 version of Kali Linux, which I find better and more suitable for this course. But right now, here is the next option that pops up, which is the configuration of network. The host name, we can call it test. The domain name, we can simply just delete and leave on empty because we don't really need it at the moment. And here is the option that I talked about. It will ask us to set up users and passwords. And this option didn't exist in the previous versions, only in 2020.1a version, which is the one we're installing at the moment. So you will have to create a new user. In this case, I will just call it test. Username for your account will also be test. And here we choose a password for the new user. Here you can type any password you like. I'm going to type test1234 and also test1234 and click on continue. Configuring the clock, I will select Eastern. The partitioning of disks, we want to select the option guided, use entire disk. Select the hard disk that you created during the previous video and click on continue. And here we want to set all files in one partition, as it does even say in the brackets, recommended for new users. Click on continue. Click finish partitioning and write changes to disk. We want to select yes and click on continue. Now this will start the installation, which will get interrupted with maybe 1-2 questions. Keep in mind that this will take some time to actually install, especially the newest version. It did take me around 45 minutes to an hour to actually finish all of the installations. And once it finishes that, you should be ready to use your Kali Linux machine. Now we're just going to leave it right here, and if we get any pop-up question, I'm going to get back to you right away. Okay, so here is the first pop-up question. It is the configuration of the package manager. Here you simply just want to click on continue and leave this blank. Alright, so here is another question, and this is actually the newest feature of the Kali Linux 2020.1a, which allows us to actually install desired tools and not install everything that we might never use. But even though, I would still advise you to actually select everything, or at least select the most important tools for Kali Linux, especially if you plan on using it later on, even after the course. Now, for our course, it really doesn't matter what you select right here, as we are simply just going to use Python 3 during our lectures. So right here, you can use spacebar to select different things, such as Kali desktop environment. You can select everything if you want. It doesn't really matter, just once you select everything that you need, you can click on continue. And this installation right here will take some time. There will be another pop-up question which will ask you something along the lines whether you want to install the grub bootloader to the master boot record, where you want to select yes. And after that, I believe there will be no more pop-ups and you should have the installation complete and your Kali Linux will be ready to use. So that would be about it for this installation tutorial. I will leave some links in the resources of the lecture where you can get familiar with the Kali Linux a little bit more and where you can perform top 10 things that everyone should do after installing Kali Linux. Okay, so that would be about it for this tutorial, and in the next lecture we're finally going to see how we can download and install PyCharm, which we're going to use for creating our programs. Hope I see you there and take care. Bye. Welcome back. Now that we got our Kali Linux setup and ready, all we are left to do before we can start coding is install the PyCharm. Now, what is PyCharm, you might be asking? Well, PyCharm is an integrated development environment used for computer programming, especially aimed for Python programmers. It is also cross-platform, so you can get it for Windows, macOS and Linux systems if you'd like. Now let's see how we can actually download it. First of all, we need to open up our Firefox, and depending on which version of Kali Linux you are running, it might be located on the left side of the screen right here, in case you're using the newest version, and in case you're using the 2019.4 version, like I am, you simply just go to this icon right here, type in Firefox, and click enter. It will open up the Firefox for you, and then we can navigate to the Google search bar and type PyCharm. Click on the first link that pops up and then click on download. You will see that it will automatically realize that we are running Linux systems, and we will get two different versions available for download. We get the professional version and the community version. Now, since the community version is free and open source, we're going to download that one instead of the professional version. In just a few seconds, this pop-up window should come up, and it will ask us whether we want to open the file or save the file. In this case, we want to save the file. Click here on OK. And right here under this arrow, if you click on it, you will see that it has started downloading PyCharm on our Kali Linux machine. Now, while this is downloading, I just want to mention one thing. So I will just lower this, and I will open up the terminal, which is this icon right here. In case you are using the newest version, you will not be a root account inside of the terminal. You will simply just be a user that you created during the installation, which I showed in the previous few videos. If you're using the 2019.4 version like I am, you will not have a problem with root account, as you will simply just be the root account every time you log in, as we can see right here. Now, let me just zoom this in so we can see everything a little bit better. Okay, so it's good now. Therefore, some of the commands that we run will require root privileges, and I just want to show you how you can run them. For example, let's say the command whoami requires root privileges. Now, it doesn't, but let's say it does. If you're using a simple user account and not a root account, in order to run the whoami command and not get the access denied error, you can simply just type sudo whoami. Now, on the newest version of Kali Linux, it will ask you for the password of your own account. You simply just type it in and it will execute this command and give you the output. Okay? So I just wanted to mention that in case you run into some errors where you require root privileges in order to run. And now let's see if our download has finished. We have 73 more megabytes left, so I'm just going to wait for this to finish and then we will proceed with the installation. Okay, so it has finished. We want to click on this icon right here, which will open up the folder where our PyCharm is located. We can close the Firefox as we'll no longer need it. And right here we can see that the PyCharm is located in the /root/downloads directory. Now on the new Kali Linux it might be / the name of your account and then /downloads. So let's navigate inside of our terminal to that directory /root/downloads. Type ls and we can see PyCharm is right here. Now you might notice that it has the extension of .tar.gz, which simply just means that this is a packed file and we have to unpack it before we actually run anything from it. In order to unpack this, you simply just type the command tar and then -xzf and then the name of the file. You can simply just type py and then tab in order to autocomplete the name so you don't have to bother typing all of this by yourself. Press here enter and in just a few seconds this should be unpacked. Okay, so here it is. Once we type ls once again, now we will have another directory which will be the unpacked PyCharm directory. So let's navigate to there using the cd command, type ls, and we will see a bunch of files and directories inside of this PyCharm directory. We want to go to the bin directory, type ls once again, and inside of this bin directory we want to run this pycharm.sh file. Now you might notice that this is a .sh extension, therefore we need to run it using bash. We simply just type in bash and then pycharm.sh. Now this is another command that might require root privileges in order to run, so in case you are using the newest version of Kali Linux and you are not root account, you simply just type sudo and then bash pycharm.sh. Type in the password and this should execute with no problems. So let's run this. It will run the pycharm.sh program and it should start PyCharm for us. Here it is, we got PyCharm opened up, and before we actually click on create new project, we want to go down here under the configure and click on create desktop entry. We want to check create the entry for all users and click on OK. Once we do that, we can simply just click on create new project, call it test, since this is the test project and we're not going to code anything inside of this project, and it should load up this window right here. It will create the virtual environment for you. It will give you some tips for the programming and also for the PyCharm, which we are not really interested in. And when everything is done and everything is loaded up, we should be ready to code. So let's click on close right here. Let's enlarge this. So this is how PyCharm looks like. Now in order to create a file and start coding, you can go to the test, right click on it, click on new and then Python file. Let's call it test.py. And it will let you code Python program right here. So you can simply just type print hello world and then go under run the program, run the test, and here it is, the output which says hello world. Now if you install PyCharm for the first time, these letters right here might be too small for you. Let's see how we can increase the font of these letters. So you can go on to the file, go to the settings. Under the settings you want to go to the editor, click on font, and under the font you can change whichever font you like. So let's say 22, click on OK, and the letters are now larger. So now that we got the PyCharm ready, in the next section we're going to start off with our first project, which is going to be a port scanner in Python 3. Okay, so that will be about it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and let's get straight into the hacking in the next section. Take care, bye. Hello everybody and welcome to our first project where we are going to code our own port scanner using Python 3. So in the previous section we introduced ourselves to Kali Linux, we installed PyCharm, and now we are ready to start writing our code. Before we start, let's first explain what is the purpose of a port scanner, what it will do, and how are we going to create it. Well, first of all, a port scanner is a program that allows you to scan target machine and discover whether it has some open or closed ports. For example, we all know that the port 80 is used in order to serve HTTP and in order to serve a website page. Now, how would you actually discover whether port 80 is open without visiting that page? Well, using our port scanner, we can see whether we can connect to that port 80 or whether we cannot. If we can connect, that means that the port is open and it is most likely hosting a web page there. And if we cannot connect, that means that the port is closed. Simple as that. So that will be the baseline and the base part of our program. Now let's open a new project, and to do that we can go right here onto File and then New Project. Here we can call it Port Scanner. Click on Create. It will ask you whether you want to open the new project in this window or in another window. I will simply just select this window right here. It will create the virtual environment for this project, and then we can start coding. Now here it is, the port scanner. We will click on New and then Python file, and we will call it portscanner.py. Okay, Python file, we created it. Let me just enlarge a little bit more the font size. So once again to the editor, font, and right here let's go 24, apply, and now we are ready to go. Now for this project we are going to need two different Python libraries. We're going to need to import the socket library, and we're also going to need to import a library called IPY. And we're going to import it like this, from IPY, import IP. Now right away, you might notice that the IPY and IP are both red underlined. This means that the PyCharm cannot recognize this library and cannot find it. So before we actually start using it, we need to download it first. Now there are a few ways that we can actually download it. You can download it using a regular terminal, which we are going to do as a first try right here. So I will just put it like this so we can see everything. Now in order to install a desired library using the terminal, you have to use a command called pip3 install. Now pip3 is a part of Python 3, and it is used to actually install Python 3 libraries that are missing and that you need in order to run your program. Okay, now if you're using a new Kali Linux, you most likely won't have pip3 installed, and in order to install it, you simply just type apt install python3-pip. Press your enter and it will install it for you. For me, it is already been installed, so we can continue right away. Let me clear the screen, enlarge this a little bit, just in case you cannot see what I'm typing. And let's get the library that we're missing. So pip3 install IPY. Press your enter. And it will say requirement already satisfied. Now this might seem confusing because 2 minutes ago I just told you that we are missing this library, that we cannot find it. And here inside of a terminal it says that the requirement has already been satisfied and that we already have this library at this location. Well, that is another part of the PyCharm that you need to understand. PyCharm simply creates a virtual environment every time you create a new project. That means that the library that you have installed inside of your Kali Linux doesn't necessarily have to be installed inside of your PyCharm program. Therefore, this IPY library has not been installed inside of this virtual environment. So where can we install it? Well, you can go here on terminal, and you will see right away that before the root Kali and then the actual directory, we have this VNV inside of brackets, which stands for virtual environment. So right here, if we type the same command, which is pip3 install, and then IPY, press here enter, you can see that right now it is successfully downloading it, and it has downloaded it inside of our virtual environment. Right now, if we lower this, go right here, you can see that this is no longer red underlined, and now we have both of our libraries ready to use. So I just wanted to show you that because it is really important, and we will be switching between libraries throughout the entire course, so it is important for you to understand the meaning of a virtual environment. Therefore, once you next time try to install a desired library that is missing from PyCharm, don't use Linux terminal like this. You simply just go down here, and inside of this PyCharm project you can install the desired library inside of the virtual environment. So now that we imported the desired libraries, in the next video we can start finally coding our port scanner. See you there. Bye. Welcome back everybody. Let's continue with our port scanner. So what we did by now is we imported two libraries that we need in order for our program to work. Let's get straight into coding the main program. Okay, so first thing, let's think about it, what we need to logically do in order to discover whether a port is open or closed. Well, we need to establish a connection with the target machine, and then we need to try to connect to the specific port. If we manage to connect, the port is open. If we don't manage to connect, the port is closed. Now there is another thing that can happen, and that is that the port is filtered, but we are not going to cover that at the moment. So, first of all, let's see how we can establish the connection. Here is where we use the socket library. Socket library allows us to establish the connection over internet. So, how can we do that? Well, it's rather easy, and it's something that we will use throughout this course a lot. It's a same scheme of few different lines of code that will allow us to connect to the target machine. So in the first line, we will define a socket descriptor. We do that by specifying the name and then equals socket.socket. Just like this, we define the socket descriptor, and you can name this anything you want. It doesn't have to be named sock, it can be named s, but for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to leave it on sock. As soon as we do that, we can try to connect to the target machine. So sock.connect, and inside of this connect function, we need to specify two open and two closed brackets, and there we need to specify the IP address and the port that we want to connect to. Alright? Now you will see right away that once again this IP address and this port is underlined red. That means that this is not defined. So we need to define what IP address is and what port is. What we're going to do is we're simply just going to create a variable which will be called IP address, and we're going to set this variable to be equal to whatever the user of this program inputs during the running of the program. Now what I mean by that is we're going to use the input function, which allows us to at the runtime specify the IP address that we want to scan. So we're going to prompt to the user of this program something like this, enter target to scan. Okay. Now that we have that, we also need to define the port, and let's say the port will be port 80. It will be a simple integer, so we're going to select it like this. And now our code is good to go. All we are left to do is we are left to wrap this inside of a try and accept rule, and this try and accept rule basically means that we are going to try this, and in case that doesn't work, we're going to try something else, which will be under this accept part. So try and then sock.connect, we are trying to connect to the port, and if we don't manage to connect, we're going to print to the screen that the port is closed. And we can simply just specify port 80 is closed, because we are scanning that port. If we do manage to connect, we can print port 80 is open. Okay, so this is the base part of the program. Let's see whether this works. Now, in order to test this and see whether it works, I'm going to pick a random IP address, which in this case will be the IP address of my laptop. And in your case, you can simply just scan any website on the internet. For example, let's say we go to Firefox, and we can visit any website we want. Now keep in mind, once we actually manage to visit the website, that means that the port 80 is open because we are loading the web page. So let's go to this one. You can choose any you like. I'm going to scan this one. Okay, so let's copy this. This is the name of the website. Let's go right here inside of our terminal and let's try to run the program. Python 3 and then the name of the program, which in our case, it is Python 3 port scanner.py. It will ask us to enter the target to scan. Now you will notice if you specify like this, so we paste the name of the website and we click here enter, it will tell you that the port 80 is closed. Now why does it tell that? Is the port 80 really closed? Well, not really, since we actually managed to open it right here on our Firefox. Therefore something is wrong with our program. Well, we cannot really specify the link to the actual website, so how can we discover the IP address to this website? Well, we can use something called NSLookup. And we specify the actual link, press here enter, and what this will do, it says cannot find. Let's just try like this, without the HTTP, www, and then the name of the website. Okay, so here it is. Now we are able to retrieve the IP address to this specific website. What if we copy this IP address and go with this? So copy. And let's clear the screen and run our port scanner once again. Enter target to scan. We paste this. And now we get the correct result. It says port 80 is open. Okay? So for now on, what we did, we created two simple variables. One will host the IP address that we input during the running of the program, and the other one will host the port number 80. So we are not inputting this, we are not changing this. This will simply just stick to 80 for now. Then we try to connect, and if we manage to connect, we print that the port 80 is open. If we don't manage to connect, we print port 80 is closed. Okay, so good for now, we discovered that the port 80 is open on this specific website that we scanned. But this is not really what we want, right? We want to actually scan multiple targets, we want to scan all ports or as many number of ports as we like. We want to print which port is open, which port is closed. And ideally, we also want to connect to that port and see which software is it running on that open port. Now that port scanner would be a really good one. So let's see in the next few videos how we can implement all of that. We would also like to change this program to also accept the links and not just the IP addresses. So you saw previously we couldn't really specify the link, it gave us the wrong result because it cannot really connect to a link inside of this program. But we also want to make sure that once the user of this program specifies a link such as www.google.com, it will also manage to discover open and closed ports. So we're going to see how we can perform all of that in the next few lectures. For now on, we created the base part and we are ready to continue coding on. Alright, so hope I see you in the next tutorial. Bye! Alright, welcome back. Let's continue with our port scanner. What we did by now, as you can see from the previous video, we only discovered that the port 80 is open on the website that we scanned. So what we need to do now is we need to wrap this code inside of a function. And let me show you why we are doing that. If I simply define a function which will be called scan_port, and for those of you who don't know, to define a function you simply just type def and then the function name. This function will take two parameters, which will be the IP address, which we defined at the beginning of the program, and it will also be the port. Okay, we specify two dots, and now we need to tab all of this code in so it can belong to the function that we created. Okay, so here it is. What this function will do is it will scan the port and it will define whether it is open or closed. Now, another thing that we want to do is we don't really want the port to be already predetermined. For example, let's say that the user of this program wants to scan port 22, which is the SSH port. Well, we want to allow them to actually do that, so we need to remove this port equals 80. And also from these comments right here, we want to type port, and then we're going to type it like this, plus string from the port. And the reason why we are using the string function onto this port variable is because the port variable will hold an integer value. Therefore, once we actually try to print it, we will get an error if we try to print an integer value. So we need to convert it first to string using this str function, and then we can print this. So for example, if the port is number 23, this will print port 23 is open. We also need to do the same right here. String from port. Okay, so port 23 is closed. And now let's test our function, but let's add a little bit of a twist to it. So what we want to do is we want to scan first 10 ports on our website. Alright, so how can we do that? Well, we don't have a port specified at all, so we need to iterate over numbers 1 through 10 and then specify for each number that the port is equal that exact number. Let me show you what I mean. So right here, if I go all the way down and below the function, I specify for port in range 1 through 10, I want to perform a function scan underscore port on the IP address with the port number. So what this will do is it will go for port in range from 1 to 10. So first of all, port would be number 1. We want to scan the IP address with the port equal to 1. Then it will perform this task right here. Then it will go back, change the port variable to be equal to 2, and then it will perform the same task just with the port number equal to 2. Also what we want to do is we want to copy this. Copy, then we can delete it and we can paste it below the function right here. Okay, now let's see whether this works. So once again, for this, feel free to scan any website you want. I will simply just go with the same website that we used in the previous video. And once again, in order to discover the IP address of the link, we simply just type nslookup and then the link to the actual website. Copy the IP address, copy, and then let's run the program. Enter target to scan, we select the IP address, here it is. And now it is scanning first 10 ports. Now, right away you can notice that it's not really printing anything, it is actually going rather slow, and it is still not even finished with the first port. Now we don't really want this, we want our port scanner to work faster, so how can we fix this? Well, first of all, Ctrl+C onto the program, right here, and then inside of our scan port function we need to add another line, which will be sock.set timeout, and we want to set the timeout to be equal to 0.5 seconds. Now, keep in mind also that the accuracy of the scan will depend on the length of the timeout. So some ports will take longer to connect to, and some ports will take less to connect to. If you simply just leave it without timeout, the accuracy will be the highest. The lower the timeout, the smaller the accuracy. But this is a price that we want to pay in order to actually scan the target faster. So let's see whether this worked. So Python 3 port scanner. We paste the IP address and we can see port 1 is closed and all of the 10 ports are closed on our website. So we scan ports 1 through 10. Okay, now this is probably correct for the website that I'm scanning, but how can we check that? Well, in the previous video I scanned the exact same website and I scanned the port 80. So how can I check whether this is working correctly? Well, instead of the range 1 through 10, I will simply just type 75 through 85. And most likely all of the ports will be closed except the port 80. So let's see how this works. Python 3 port scanner, paste the IP address, all the ports are closed and we have one port open and that is port 80. Okay, so our program seems to work really well. Okay, so we discovered that we need to set the timeout in order to actually scan ports faster. We lose the accuracy, but we gain on time. In the next video, we're going to take a look at how we can convert the link to an actual IP address. For example, we're going to take a look at how we can convert a link of a website to an IP address inside of our program. So whether the user of this program specifies a link or an IP address, this will still work. Okay, so I hope I see you in the next video and take care. Bye. Welcome back everyone. Let's continue with our port scanner. So what we did by now is we simply just created this function which allows us to scan the ports, and we also saw how we can use for loop in order to iterate over a certain amount of ports and scan each and every one of them. But right now let's see how we can implement a function that will allow the user of this program to specify the domain name as well as the IP address if they like. Well, here is where our IPY library comes in help. So you will notice that this is still gray. That means that we haven't used it inside of our code, and that will change now. So we'll simply just create a function up here which will be called, let's say, check_IP, and this function will take one parameter which we will specify inside of these brackets, and that parameter will be the IP address. Okay. Now before we code any of this function, we need to specify all the way down what we are going to provide to this function. And by that I mean which parameter are we going to send. Well, logically in our case we are going to send the IP address parameter. Keep in mind that this IP address variable doesn't have to store the IP address, it can also store the domain name. So what we need to do is we need to simply just, after the user specifies the target, we'll simply just call the function check_IP, and we will paste the IP address inside of that function. Then we're going to store all of this inside of a converted _IP. And you will see in just a second why we are doing this. So right here we're going to scan the converted IP address and the port number. Okay, so let's code the function above. So obviously we need to use this library right here, and this actual library comes with a specific function which is simply called IP function. Okay, so if I go to my Google Chrome and I have a page opened right here which is basically the documentation of the IPY library, we can see that they use right here this IP function in order to convert an IP address to the IP format. So in order for our function to work, we need to specify inside of the brackets the IP address, which is the parameter of our function. If it manages to convert the IP address, that means that this worked successfully and that the user actually specified the actual IP address to the target. If it gets a value error, that means that the user specified the domain name. So let's write that right here, and in case you don't understand, we're going to test this, so don't worry. We're going to try to convert the IP address, and if it manages, we're going to return simply what we sent to the function, which is the IP. And in case it doesn't work, we are going to get the value error, which means that the user most likely specified the domain name. And therefore we're going to return a function which belongs to the socket library, which allows us to convert the actual host name to the IP address. So all we need to do is specify that function and call it upon our IP address, and we can do that by simply specifying return socket.getHostByName, and here we specify the host name, or in our case the IP, which we pasted to our function. Okay, so this is our entire function. Now let's see inside of a terminal, and let's open up our Python 3, and here we can import IP. Oops, let me just do it like this. First of all, I will enlarge this so we can see it better. Open Python 3, import or from IPY, import IP. And now let's say we have a variable called IP address, and it will be 192.168.1.1. Okay, and now if I simply just call converted IP equals IP from IP address, and I print the converted IP, you will see it will still be the same IP address. So it really didn't change anything, therefore right here, if it manages to do that, we're simply just returning the IP address that we pasted inside of this function. And we're not making any changes to it. But that is only the case if this user specifies the IP address. If the user specifies the domain name, so let's create a variable called domain name equals, and then let's say google.com. And we try the same thing, so converted IP equals IP from the domain name. And you will see we will get an error, and it will be the value error. So that is the case right here. Then we are going to perform the get host by name, which will retrieve the IP address of the google.com, and then we will return the IP address inside of our scan port function. So that is all there is for this function. Now let's see whether this works. Okay, so let's run the program, Python 3, and then port scanner. Enter target to scan. Let's say we enter, let's say the same website as before. Let's not change it right now. And instead of the IP address, we now enter the domain name. We're going to leave this to run. And here we can see that it worked successfully, as it did manage to find the port 80 open. We will get the same result even if we scanned with an IP address. So right now we can specify both the domain name and IP address. So that is good. Now in the next video we're going to take a look at how we can specify multiple targets and scan multiple targets at once. So we don't have to run our program over and over again. We can do the same thing just by specifying multiple targets